following program is an encore presentation.
How do you do? We're about to unfold the story of Frankenstein.
Quite a good scene, isn't it?
Well, hello!
Oh. I thought I was alone. Good evening.
Well, we've warned you.
You've been warned. Welcome back to the second part of our bonus episode where we're talking about our top 10 favorite Boris Karloff films.
So this is it.
This is it.
We're going diving headfirst back into it.
Yep.
So enjoy.
That'll work.
My number 7, released December 22nd, 1932, is The Mummy.
Nice.
It's only lower than some because it's like you just said. Do I want to watch it more than others?
Okay.
It's an excellent film, directed by Karl Freund, who was the famous cinematographer. Shot Metropolis. You can't do much better than that, can you?
That's right. Yep.
This is his first directorial project. He only did a handful. Apparently he preferred being the cinematographer, went back to that. Developed the 3-camera television system that is still in use today.
He did?
He did, for I Love Lucy. He was the cinematographer for I Love Lucy.
Wow.
Yep, or director of photography, I guess it would be.
Yeah, I suppose.
Apparently quite dictatorial. Co-star Zita Johann did not have a good relationship with him.
Mm-hmm.
By all accounts, Karloff did. I'd never heard him complain or say anything against him anyway.
Yeah.
It's a great film. It's got a wonderful creepiness to it. The opening, of course, famous with the full mummy regalia, top to bottom. Jack Pierce, again, outdoes himself with an amazing makeup, probably even more impressive than Frankenstein's.
Yeah.
Not as iconic, not as...
I mean, when you say not as iconic, true, but right there.
Yeah, it's right up there. Oh, yeah, it's right up there. I'd say this...
I think we mentioned this in our regular podcast this week that I talked about. You give Jack Pierce Boris Karloff in the early 30s, and look what he's able to come up with.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of the shots in the beginning, though,
I'm in that weird state now because I'm going to talk about it later.
Oh,
so
yeah,
I don't know what to do.
you don't want to do too much.
Yeah.
I mean, I can wait with what I have.
Sure. I guess I don't know.
Yeah, we could
just cover it now too, and then we'll just have a shortened section on it later.
Whatever. This is one of 3 that has the Swan Lake opening for some
Yeah,
reason.
right.
Can't figure that one out.
Well, and it's interesting.
Dracula, Murders in the Rue Morgue, and the Mummy.
Well, Murders in the Rue Morgue isn't worth discussing, but Dracula and let's not talk about that shitty movie. But Dracula and the Mummy, it's interesting to me because they're so similar.
Well, it's often referred to as being a remake of Dracula, and I think that's going too far.
Mm-hmm.
There are similar aspects to it.
Yeah.
Dracula does not have the reincarnation aspect or the love over the centuries either. None of that's there in Dracula. In fact, it doesn't show up in a Dracula film until 1973. The Dan Curtis TV film with Jack Palance has that.
Don't know that one.
Oh, yeah, it's pretty good.
Huh.
And then, of course, famously in Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, that's not in Dracula. It shows up here.
Well, okay, so maybe I should mention it now then.
Yeah, go ahead.
But one of the things I was going to talk about when we talk about it later is I have a book, and I was even going to bring it in here, but you probably have it too. It's the Midnight Marquee Actors Series. Boris Karloff, and I thought I'm going to mention this book on the podcast. I'll see if you can get it for $1 or if it's like $80 if I wanted to mention it. Well, I looked and they're humming along, the Midnight Marquee. They just did that Colin Clive book, so they've done a revised edition like 8 or 9 years ago now. But point of all this is it's just a series of essays about just a series of movies. That's like 30 films, Boris Karloff films, and a guy named Paul Jensen does a piece on the Mummy, and I noticed he also does a commentary on the Mummy.
DVD or Blu-ray,
but this article he writes is really interesting because he devotes a couple of pages to Balderston writing the Mummy at almost the exact same time he's writing a movie called She, which I haven't seen. Have you seen it?
Yeah.
Okay. So he talks about Balderston, the guy who wrote Dracula, and is also writing She, and how it affects how he takes an existing script for The Mummy that was written by somebody else and inverts a lot of it and introduces what you're talking about, this element of the love through the years and all that
the
stuff.
Reincarnation
and it's really fascinating because what you end up with, it almost just seems like this strange confluence of circumstances that leads to this script that's really brilliant.
It is, yeah.
It's perfect.
Yeah. It started off as something called Cagliostro.
Yeah, right.
A magician or...
what a mess.
Prophet. Yeah, it is. I've read it.
Yeah.
It is a mess. It would have been... We wouldn't be talking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the right... Again, it's like Frankenstein. The right people made the right decisions to get to the right end product.
And this is the first time that there's no literary
antecedent for it.
Yeah. So Dracula, obviously, and Frankenstein obviously.
Yeah.
So then you
Murders of the Rue Morgue. Yeah.
Yeah.
Old
Right.
Dark House. They
There
all had a book that they were based upon.
And so this is more like stuff that people at that time would have been reading in the papers.
Yeah.
About
This is Howard Carter discovering Tutankhamun in 1922.
Tutankhamun.
Yeah.
I love
like
the way Karloff. So he does that. He
Yeah.
he does a different accent here.
Yeah, he gives him it's not the usual Karloff voice.
It's not Fu Manchu.
It's not Fu Manchu. It's not Kalmar Pelzig.
It's not Welsh like in Old Dark House.
Yeah, no.
Welsh, no.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the first Universal horror where he has dialogue.
Okay, yeah, it's true.
That and he does it very well. It's a stiff performance, but I mean that as a compliment. It sounds odd, but he's a reanimated corpse.
Yeah,
basically.
Yeah.
Or if he was ever even really dead, it's kind of unclear. The beginning scene, he's propped up in a sarcophagus. You see him, the bandages top to bottom. There's famous stills. There's more stills than there is footage in the film.
I suppose that's true.
Famously, 12, 14-hour day or whatever, started the makeup around 11 in the morning, and he got home at like 3 in the morning the next day.
Yeah. Jeez.
I'm assuming they only did it once.
Okay.
They only did it because he said it was like the hardest day he ever had in movies. So I assume it was only the one time. You only see him in the medium and close shots.
Yeah.
Most of the shots, it's a prop.
Yeah, you mentioned that to me recently. I don't remember.
Yeah.
But I didn't never know that. So it's not noticeable for me. You can tell?
If you know it, you sort of can, but
okay.
I mean, it was years before I realized.
Okay.
Hey, wait a minute, and then
that
I
ain't him. That's
looked into it a little bit.
No, wait. That's But there are great close-ups of it.
Yeah, there's
when
great
you say
close-ups.
close-up, there's a nice pan down,
tilting down. Yeah,
where I guess they're gonna. What you're looking at is that he starts to
move.
But you're also just looking at this amazing
makeup
and
the detail. If you really look at it, his face, the wrappings have come off, but there are vestiges of it having been there in the wrinkles and stuff where it had been. Like if you were wrapped up and dyed that way, it would take on that look.
Right.
Doesn't necessarily look like a real mummy.
Well, I had a Band-Aid on here earlier, and you can see where it was.
Yeah.
Not the same idea,
not the same,
I guess, really, but it's the same idea.
There's a great, like the little tip of his nose is fallen off almost. And there's all these great little details to it that it's amazing. And little strands of stuff just sort of hanging off, like the hand reaching down for the scroll. There's a little bit just sort of dangling off, a little flaky bit just dangling off. And
you can recognize his hand.
Oh, yeah,
that's something
definitely.
we talked about a few weeks ago on Frankenstein Minute is you recognize this guy's
Karloff's
hand.
hands, definitely. And I know several friends that are disappointed that you don't actually see him getting out of the sarcophagus and walking over and grabbing the scroll and walking out. And you get that later in all the other sequels, and it's really not that great.
It's true.
It's really not that exciting.
Plus, you're complaining about a great scene.
Yeah.
The way it's done is great.
Exactly. That's my point.
It's not like they fucked it up.
No. And I think that was probably all shot because there are stills of him bending over and reaching for the scroll and whatnot. But it doesn't need to be there. I think it's more effective that it's not.
Yeah.
I saw this film when I was like 7.
Okay.
I was at my friend's house across the street and up like 3.
Okay.
And it was in the fall, and it was on Channel 5 at like 8 o'clock on a Friday night. So I had to walk home across the street at 10 o'clock. And it was the longest walk I've ever had in my life. This is the one movie of this cycle that genuinely scared me a little bit when I was a kid.
Okay.
That mummy was somewhere behind these trees.
Yeah.
And that
That's
scene is a
interesting.
very effective scene.
Because it has to be that scene.
Yeah.
Because then the movie changes into
Changes
something completely different.
Yeah. But he's great, though. He's great as Ardith Bay. He shows
yeah.
up, 11 years later as Ardith Bay. Same guy. He's just cleaned himself up a little bit.
Oh, I thought you meant, I'm trying to think, I thought you meant that he played Ardith Bay 11 years later in another movie.
Within the framework of the story,
40,
it's 11 years
it's
have
11 years
passed.
have passed, yes. And he looks, I mean, he looks like, almost like a mummy there, too.
Yeah. Was it that very wrinkled, leathery, textured skin,
Yeah.
which is another amazing makeup.
Yep.
Two for the price of one here.
Yeah.
And Pierce, again, every time outdoes himself.
Yep.
And it's not until the 40s and the run of sequels that it starts to look a little iffy. But in his prime, giving the creative license, he does the most amazing things.
Mm-hmm. I think it's interesting to compare Frankenstein, the Frankenstein monster, and the Mummy, because it's a similar thing to what we had just talked about how the character, I can't find anything to do with that character, so he becomes a lump or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, the Mummy is even more so.
Yeah.
When you watch the Mummy cycle, you might as well not even watch the first one, or either watch one or the other. The first movie is
so different from one another.
But it's also there. It works. It's actually really effective to have the Mummy as this lumbering character. That's who the Mummy is.
Well,
when you think of the Mummy, that's what you think of.
That's what you think of, right? I mean, given the choice, I would watch this.
Yeah.
But if you're going to do it, our friend John and I have done what we call the Mummy canon a number of times, where we'll start with this, and then there's a big leap to the Mummy's hand, which is actually a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun. It's a fun movie. Great cast. Looks good. Has that great set, that temple set, which was left over from a James Whale film.
Does that one have Zuko? George Zuko?
George Zuko is in it. George Zuko's in 2 or 3 of them.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And then you get to the Chaney 3, and it's basically the same film over and over again. I almost would bet money that by the third one, it's not even Chaney anymore, because it's a rubber mask. It's not makeup.
Yeah.
You paid him to use his name, and it's a stunt man. I swear to God, why would you even bother? If he was that difficult by that point, and he hated it so much, it's like, here's your check, Lon. Do whatever. Go hunting.
When you say by that point, the Wolfman's 41. Is that when Chaney becomes anything at all, really? I mean, he'd done a couple of them before that, but that's where he
41 was where he becomes...
where he may get a big head.
Yeah.
Well, when's the last Mummy movie?
43, 44.
Yeah, by that point he was already a pain in the ass.
I've heard. Yeah, get my dialogue before noon, because you're gonna get it after lunch.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein is 48.
Yeah.
Huh. It's weird how these...
And he'd kind of been out of the genre by that point. Well, everybody was, because it pretty much
there
ended
wasn't
in
one.
46.
Yeah.
And it was the slow segue into the sci-fi boom of the 50s.
Yeah.
Well, even on Ghost, he was a handful, I guess.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah. And he was the guy who said he would out Karloff, and you talk about missing it by a mile. He's good as Larry Talbot.
He's good as Larry Talbot.
I'm going to leave it there.
There you go.
What else do I have? There was a big, lengthy reincarnation sequence. There's where he has the Zeta Johann character looking into the pool, and you get the flashback.
Yeah.
Which is great, because it's even as a kid, it creeped me out, and I only recently realized why, is because it's slightly undercranked.
Yeah.
So it has a surreal, almost silent movie
it does.
quality, so it really feels of another era.
Yeah.
Even in 32,
that's interesting.
has a feel of another time. It's like looking at The General. It looks like it was shot in the Civil War.
Yeah.
And not in 1927.
Yep.
There's that remove. And it's silent too. It's narrated, but you don't have dialogue. So it has that really, I won't say surreal, but otherworldly quality to it.
Yes.
And that was to be followed.
And something really creepy happens in it.
There's that one shot. I don't know if you were going to talk about it later, but where they're wrapping him up, and the last thing you see of him is these eyes staring out in just abject terror as the final bandage goes over his face. Very, very effective.
He's really good, Boris Karloff.
Let's just
call
put it out
it.
there. Yeah,
let's just call it a day.
He's great. There's to follow a whole series of various reincarnations of her throughout time. She's with Saxons, and she's a Christian with the Lions, and there's an anecdote about shooting that, and they cut all that out, and I think it's for the better. I think it would really have slowed it down, and they take the focus away from where it needed to be.
David Manners.
Yeah,
that's the star of this film.
David Manners, yeah. Here's a question. I was talking to my friend John. Would David Manners have been better than John Bowles in Frankenstein?
Yeah.
That's what we
I don't know
thought,
why
too.
I thought about it that long.
That's what we thought too.
Just want to apologize to fans of the podcast for thinking about it for a full second and a half.
Yeah. Totally off topic, but anyway, he's in the film.
Here's a question.
Yeah.
Would a bucket of water have been better than John Bowles?
Very probably.
All right.
The dummy that falls off the windmill.
Would have been better.
All right, that's it.
All right, we're done here.
Yeah.
Okay, so now I believe I'm up to my number
you're
7. And my number 7 is The Black Cat. You keep saying the release date before you say it, which is fun, but I don't know any of these release dates. So The Black Cat is from 1934.
I have it for
you have it later? All right, so
yeah.
now here we go.
Yeah.
This movie is, it's in my top 10 favorite Boris Karloff films.
Yes,
it's
it is.
fantastic, and it's a lot of fun to watch. It's really cool looking.
It is. It's got that great Art Deco Bauhaus design to it that Edgar Ulmer, the director, was a huge fan of, and it was instrumental, I think, in a lot of that early on. He'd been art director in Germany. I believe this is his first film as a director.
Okay.
And he would never have an opportunity like this again.
Yeah.
Spent most of his career in Poverty Row as a result of this film and some things that went on behind the scenes. But
was this? That's right. What went on behind the scenes?
He basically stole a Lemley's wife.
Oh, that's right.
And that was a big no-no, obviously, at Universal.
Yeah.
So that pretty much got him canned. And
yeah, that's right. Okay.
Went on to he did some great stuff. Don't get me wrong. I mean, Detour is an amazing-looking film.
Okay.
Even the Man from Planet X or whatever it is looks good. It's dramatically kind of silly, but it looks good.
Speaking of looks good but dramatically kind of silly, The Black Cat. Again, it's weird because it's kind of a theme for my notes that I've been taking and what I've been saying for this podcast is a lot of these movies are really silly.
They are.
And it's weird because I think maybe because we've been talking about Frankenstein, that movie's not particularly silly.
Not silly.
So we will talk over the years about silly stuff a lot. And this movie it barely makes it. When you hear about what they shot and then had to go back and reshoot and the changes they had to make, this movie barely holds it together.
Right, but it does hold it together very well.
Oh, absolutely. It's on my top 10 favorite. I mean, I love it, but okay, so yes, it does. Like, do you mean does it still end up making sense? And it is a movie, yeah. And it's a surprise when you look at the changes they had to make that it even does work together.
Right.
Lugosi, it's not a great Lugosi performance, but it is a performance that I enjoy because of the context of it. This movie is it's not right.
Yeah.
Everything's not right.
Everything's a little off kilter. Yeah.
Everything's a little off kilter.
Yes.
Karloff is not right, but he seems to be having a blast.
He's having a ball.
It.
Yeah. Here's the one I referenced earlier where he uses his lisp to great effect.
Right. Yes.
It's almost serpentine.
Mm-hmm. Especially when he says, "You lose, Vitas." No, I'm just kidding. I just can't. I think about that line a lot. This is famous overdub. It was done by, I'm going to guess. Is it?
It's what I've heard.
I was going to say John Bowles. I don't know. You lose, Vitas.
It's about that good. There's another one that Lugosi's overdubbed as "Wait Here."
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's the same voice. No attempt has been made to sound like either of them.
Like, this movie gets weird right at the beginning.
Yeah.
It's interesting to think about, the vestiges of the creepiness. Okay, so what I guess I could say what this movie's about. I don't know exactly. I don't know what this movie's about. It's about some people are in an accident.
Well, they're honeymooning in Budapest, which seems like an odd thing to be doing in the first place.
Yeah.
They're an American couple honeymooning in Budapest. That would not even be top 50
1,000
places to go for my honeymoon.
Yeah. Well, then we get an extended scene later where they talk about where they should go because it's the hometown of the one guy and not the other guy. I mean, everything about this movie is so strange.
But that scene, it doesn't work at all. But it's way better than a similar scene in Murders in the Rue Morgue when they're arguing about what language the gorilla was talking.
Okay.
That is beyond hurtful.
See, again, in this movie, I think this scene actually does work because it's just one more fucking weird thing that happens.
Yeah.
Like it's this movie isn't a movie about a bunch of fucking weird things that happen, but it kind of is.
It's not about it, but it's a collection of weird fucking things that happen.
And David Manners in that scene, because I just watched it yesterday. In that scene, David Manners looks like he can't believe it that these guys are
actually
this
going
weird comedy
he
duo.
Turns into this vaudeville act all of a sudden.
He's like got this look on his face, like,
what?
Are we really doing this?
The cameras are rolling?
Are we still making a movie? Or what are we doing? And the movie's full of all these weird things. Lugosi, and that's where this is what's great about it is it was obviously billed and in the Karloff and Lugosi book in particular, they talk about all the efforts that were put into this was a Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi are going to get together in a movie. This is a very exciting thing, and that works to its advantage because they're cast as these opposites.
Well, I think this is a good point, and I think it's the only time this really works. Their opposing acting styles play off of each other. Lugosi, as usual, is a little over the top. Ulmer actually said he had to pull him back numerous times and cut away quickly.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, that's
because
true.
It would just the usual Lugosi over the top, and sometimes it works really well. He weren't in those Poverty Row things from the 40s; they'd be all but unwatchable. Devil Bat was on TV the other day, and I just had it on as I was puttering around. And
the only thing
that makes it watchable is Lugosi pulling out all the stops, and
White Zombie is an obvious example of that for me. Everyone who's in White Zombie that's not Lugosi, right? Well, wait, who's in White Zombie?
Nobody.
Everybody in it is terrible. Yeah, except so yes, it's almost like this is the caveat that we're finally introducing that we don't hate Lugosi.
Don't hate Lugosi. Yes,
and it's only for a bonus episode. Don't tell the regular people.
No,
we don't hate Lugosi. But
well, I think when we get to a certain film,
absolutely,
that's his best. That's his best work.
Right. Well, there's going to be a number of these.
Yeah.
So in this case, this movie's so fucking weird that it's fine. I mean, like you were talking about the casting them in these opposite roles where they play off each other. They literally play chess in this movie to determine the fate of another
the heroine.
character.
Yeah,
this movie's a weird kind of almost like a fairy tale in that sense. Like, who are these guys and why is this happening? I don't understand what the fuck's going on.
The reality is so heightened.
Yeah,
and it's all confined to this house.
Yeah,
and it's a weird house to begin with. It's cool.
Yeah.
Look at it. It's a great set, but it's just nothing about it is. I'd like to live in this house. It's very cold. It's very strange house.
Yep.
Which suits the character who lives there.
Right.
Karloff's character, Hjalmar
Pulzig.
The greatest architect in Budapest or whatever, and
I don't know what the fuck's going on.
It's built over the ruins of a fort that he sold out to the Russians in World War I or something like that.
So that would have to be, right?
I think that's it, and I think a lot of that suffered when they had to do the reshoots and rejiggering it a little bit.
Yeah. It's just such a. Have you ever read the original script or anything like it?
I've read original treatment.
Okay.
Greg Mank has written about it a number of times.
So what you've got is a movie where we're going to have Karloff and Lugosi in it, and like you say, we're going to play that up. We're going to have them be opposites, and the movie is about them deciding the fate of this woman that they both want to. They want to defile and whatever.
Originally.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the point. I'm trying to
because
figure this movie out.
When they did the reshoots, they softened Lugosi's character to the point where he's trying to rescue her.
Yes. So at the beginning of the movie, he's stroking her hair.
Yeah.
And you're like, fucking
she's
weirdo,
asleep.
Man.
Yeah, they're asleep. He's stroking her hair, and Manners wakes up and is like, "Dude,"
and does not just beat the shit out of him.
Yeah. He's a better man than I am.
Because
I think I'd have been all over that. He just glares at him. And And Lugosi says, "Oh, you have to beg my indulgence or whatever."
Manners makes the best of some really thankless roles.
He has.
So when you wake up and you see this person that you just met stroking your wife's
slightly
hair,
off-putting to begin with.
True. Can you just look at him? That's what you're expected to do. Now roll him.
Yeah.
You know. But again, this is even more so than David Manners' career that I've ever seen is him being the second banana to somebody else, and this is just another example.
This is one of 3 or 4 in this cycle.
Yeah. Now he's got them both basically because he's in Dracula and the Mummy
and now this.
Yeah. So now he's got both of them.
Yeah.
To contend with. By.
It's like this just gets worse and worse.
And that's what's so great about that comedy scene is you have that. You've got David Manners trying to just be in a scene with Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi, and a couple other jackasses walk in and start doing a comedy routine. It's just so much fun to watch this.
What are the
and be
names
like,
of the
what
players
the
on the Budapest baseball team?
Yeah.
It's about that broad.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. It is. Yes, they stand side by side.
Third base.
Like they're going to do who's on first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Karloff looks great.
Yes.
It's not an often commented upon Jack Pierce makeup, but it's a great one.
Yeah. I think you mentioned it again this week.
I did. Yeah.
Because it's Jack Pierce doing
what
Karloff
he
again.
You give him that face.
Yep.
And he does wonders with it.
And so does Karloff.
Yes.
There's just so many times that he does stuff, but like when he says, "Did you hear that? Even the phone is dead."
That's a great line.
His face is really he's really disturbing.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, he's got that
He's
grin.
a creep.
He is a creep. The character's he's a Satanist, for God's sake.
Yeah, he's a literal Satanist.
And
I thought you were going to say sadist, which he is too.
He is. He wants to win the chess game so he can sacrifice her to Satan in the Black Mask. You don't get a whole lot weirder than that.
Yeah, I guess
that's kind of that's up there on my list of weird shit.
Yeah, weird shit. Well, I mean, it's up there on the list of weird shit he does in this movie.
Yeah,
to be honest,
yeah.
He's a weirdo.
He's a necrophiliac.
He's got all kinds of problems. But he's again charming in his own way.
Yeah. Well, the first scene he's in, when the first scene with Lugosi and Manners, it's a while before he even says anything. Mm-hmm. He just enters the room and just sort of stands there and looks at them as they're talking back and forth. And when he finally does talk, it's that he plays up the lisp. He doesn't give it an accent, really.
Yeah.
But it's not the usual Boris voice that we're familiar with. He gives it a little something. Yep. But he's all-consuming fear of cats. So he hisses at the end of it. It's so good in this. Mm-hmm. This not only makes my top 10 Karloff, but it's my top 10 Universal horrors, top 10, probably top 5 30s horror films, Lemley, whatever.
Okay.
I like it a lot.
I was kind of curious to see how we would talk about this movie because we've talked about The Raven recently.
Yeah.
And that's the next one. So the following year, they
did it
worked
again.
So great. They're going to bring him back and we're going to do it again. And it is a fun movie to watch, and I enjoy watching it. It didn't make the list.
It's not a good movie, but it's enjoyable.
It
wasn't even in my top 30.
Oh.
Yeah.
All right. It's higher than that for me. I don't think I've seen 30 Karloff films. Or I don't think I could name 30 Karloff films.
Yeah, I just did them off the top of my head and then ranked them.
Man.
I didn't watch all of them in preparation for this. As I ticked some of them off, then I didn't bother with watching them again.
Well, I've watched a lot of them, but I haven't watched every single one of these in preparation for this. Okay. But I did watch this one, and
I did too. I watched
it's a
all
reminder.
10 of them this week.
This movie, it's like it's a surprise when I watch it. Every time I'm like, oh my God, that's right. He's just such a creep. Or that's right. She's hanging by her hair in that thing.
Yeah, or he's Bill is flaying Karloff alive at the end. Yeah. We'll have more on that later.
We'll have more on that later.
So moving on. Now, am I at my number 6?
I think so.
Yeah, well, it's The Black Room, which we already discussed in some pretty good detail. I don't know that I really have a whole lot. It was shot just after The Raven, which we were talking about.
Yep.
So I think for him, The Raven was probably not that great of an experience. I'm telling you, the 1935 Raven, obviously, not the 63.
This is good. It'll give us another opportunity to talk about The Raven.
Yes.
Because it's really bad.
It is a silly film.
I don't remember if I said this on. I guess I wouldn't have said it on the podcast yet. But there's a point recently in a recent episode that you mentioned The Raven as something you don't like, and I said, "Oh, you don't like The Raven?"
Yeah, you were a little
as
surprised.
if I was like, "Yeah, it's great." So I watched it again, and I'm like, "Oh man, this movie's a mess. This is bad news." But again, it's fun. I don't know what it does. It's a Boris Karloff, Bela Lugosi movie. They're both in it. They both have
parts in the movie.
I mean, they're important characters in the movie.
The thing I see as the distinction between the two, the main distinction, is that Black Cat is Karloff's film. Mm-hmm. He's billed huge, Karloff, and Bela Lugosi. Mm-hmm. They have a little more equal billing, but Karloff is still first in The Raven. But it's Lugosi's film. Mm-hmm. And I think Karloff will let him have it. Yeah. I don't think he's ever more over the top and unhinged as he is in The Raven. I'm talking about Lugosi.
Lugosi, yeah.
Yeah. It is the quintessential lunatic Lugosi performance. Yeah. Especially towards the end. He's just.
So what's funny about that is that's the strength of it.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the strength of the movie. Everything else in it is terrible.
Yeah. Karloff just steps back and like, yeah, you go.
Yeah.
This is yours. And there's talk about.
I say it's the strength of it, but Lugosi's bad in it.
It's not a good performance.
Yeah,
right.
I don't mean to give the impression he's good in it.
Yeah.
But he is the thing to watch, and the reason to watch it is because he's bad. Yeah. That makes it a bad movie.
Anyway.
So yeah, you're right. So Karloff comes out of that.
Goes into the Black Room, where he's given an opportunity, like we discussed when it was on your list, part of the list, to play almost 3 different roles. Mm-hmm. And he does them great. I don't know. I think we covered most of what we can cover with it.
Yeah. Like I said, I hadn't even seen it until 2 weeks ago, and it's on my list.
I saw it years ago on
Was
TV.
it part of the Shock package?
I think it was.
It's
is either Shock or Son of
Columbia?
Shock? Because there was.
Yes, it was. I actually just saw this recently.
Bulk of them were Universal, but there was some Columbia strewn in because it was through Screen Gems, which is an offshoot.
Yeah, I just was looking at the Universal Horrors book. I was looking up something, and then in one of the appendixes they mentioned the Shock, and then there's Shock and Son of Shock. Yeah. So I think Shock might be all Universal or almost all Universal. No,
there's literally a handful of Columbia.
And then Son of Shock is a bunch of Columbia.
Yeah, more
Screen
Columbia
Gems or whatever.
Well, but Bride of Frankenstein doesn't appear until Son of Shock.
Interesting.
A couple of them don't appear till. A couple of biggies don't appear till.
Do people know what Shock and Son of Shock are?
Well, we do, but
yeah, they're So what are they?
They're the package of films that were released to television in 1956, 58. First time these films were ever released onto television, and they were considered pretty disposable, but they were a huge hit, and they would play for weeks on end.
Yeah.
That's how we all, as baby boomers or whatever, became aware of them. But children of the television generation, basically.
Yeah.
Obviously, we didn't see these in the theater initially.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of them since, but that's under special circumstances.
Brought about by Shock and Son of Shock being the hit that they were. And it's interesting to think about how we, I don't know, is there something weird about starting a sentence saying it's interesting? Because maybe it's not interesting, Bill. But it's changed so much, the way that we consume this media.
Yes.
So, kids today don't see this kind of thing really at all. You get very small. You get limited. How am I trying to say this? Like the Criterion Channel is going to fire up in a bit, and that used to be called something else, and they're gonna curate. Yeah. Or if you watch TCM, they're showing you, they're sort of presenting you with stuff to watch. But generally, you can download and stream whatever the hell you want, whenever the hell you want. Right. So to have a package like that gives The Black Room equal footing as Bride of Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Because it was on the next day or whatever.
Yeah, well, it was back. I mean, I certainly wouldn't give up having all this at my fingertip.
Yeah.
But there is a certain quality of specialness that's gone. Mm-hmm. House of Frankenstein was on Friday night. Monday morning at school, everybody would be talking about it. It just doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah. You know what else is, we went and saw the Frankenstein movies in the theater. We saw, I say the Frankenstein movies, the first three. We saw Old Dark House. There's a lot of these movies will come back, but something like The Black Room or House of Frankenstein is too far down the list.
You're never gonna
see it in the
screening of that. At least not here in Minneapolis. I doubt it.
Yeah, but this October they'll be showing Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein and Dracula again.
Yeah, and and we'll be there, I'm sure.
Actually, that was what was great about Old Dark House. I think it was because they did that restoration and then they shipped it around the country or whatever.
Yep.
That's probably a pretty rare thing. That
I would think, well, certainly. And I would imagine that's going to come up.
Yeah, we'll talk about that one later.
So anyway, Black Room, great movie. If you haven't seen it, check it out.
Absolutely.
Did you know that Edward Van Sloan is in it?
No.
Yeah.
Where?
He's a doctor. He's like one little scene.
What does he say? Anything?
I don't remember. I just watched it yesterday, and I don't even remember. But he's like, hey, wait a minute, that's Edward Van Sloan.
Oh,
so
okay.
there
Probably
he
didn't
is.
have glasses on, so I didn't know.
Yeah, right. And
he does the introduction, right?
Yeah,
no, got nothing.
Mr. Harry Cohn thinks
Yeah,
it would be a little unfair.
It would be a little unfair to not explain what.
Yeah, one of the female actors is Catherine DeMille, the adopted daughter of Cecil B. DeMille, whose son drowned in W.C. Fields' pond.
In real life.
In real life.
Oh, ouch.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yep. They were neighbors, and a little boy wandered over and a little duck pond or something in Fields' backyard and drowned. And it clearly affected the family, but it affected him rather profoundly. From what
W.C. Fields.
Yeah. So there.
What a downer.
Yeah. Well, so let's move on to
cover those pools.
Yeah. To Bill's number 6.
To my number 6. Well, again, it's a repeat.
Yeah.
So maybe we won't have too much to say about it. Maybe we will.
Maybe we will.
It's called The Mummy.
There we go.
There we go. So let me think about this. So the first thing, my first note says, every step of the way it seems to be better than you'd expect.
Yeah.
Like, everything's executed so well.
Yeah.
One of the things we were talking about, Karloff's makeup, and then obviously there's the iconic makeup at the beginning of the film, but then when he comes back as Ardith Bay and he's just this wrinkly guy, there are numerous scenes where he's shown in close-up, and a lot of scenes where he's just staring at the screen, basically, and at least once where he like closes his eyes and he opens his eyes, and then they do a little pin, and they do it so well that
it's amazing,
was kind of watching it wondering how specifically did they do that, because I've seen him fuck it up before.
Oh yeah, well,
White Zombie
there's a
is
famous,
terrible, you know.
White Zombie and Dracula.
The Dracula, there
Dracula,
you go.
it's worse because they're not even on his eyes. They're like
eyes.
off kilter.
Yeah.
One's on his cheekbone, the other's on his eyebrow.
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck? How do you? All right.
Yeah, but in this movie, it's perfect.
Beautifully.
It's beautiful.
I think that if you look at the shot, you almost have that sort of domino or raccoon kind of mask.
Yeah, right.
That's black. I think maybe that was blackened in on the makeup so that it wouldn't illuminate when the
I see
spots.
what you mean, like because his eyelids were black.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So I think they just accentuated.
Like all superheroes that wear masks
yes.
now. Like since Michael Keaton.
Since Michael Keaton, yeah.
We both marked that as the starting point of that?
Yeah.
So clearly Adam West didn't have that.
No.
And that looks silly.
Yeah.
All right. So there's that. What else? I was just thinking this is an example of the whole being quite a bit better than the sum of its parts.
Yeah.
I
think most of these you could say that.
Yeah, that's probably true. Van Sloan is pretty good at this by now. He's just playing the same
this
thing.
This is his third time around in the same role.
Doing the same role that he did. Yeah. So this is what 12 months. In 12 months, he's done all 3 of these. I think.
More or less.
Dracula, Frankenstein, and this one.
Yep.
And Zita Johann is pretty good too.
Oh, she's great. Yeah.
She's really like exotic looking, and she looks
big
really strange.
Eyes and
great big eyes, and she's the way she moves and she kind of slinks around. She's fascinating to look at. Again, just little things that all sum up to make this movie better than it has any right to be. Almost.
Right. Well, the art direction is fantastic.
Yeah.
Clearly it was all shot in L.A., but it has a very authentic feel to it. All takes place in Egypt.
Yeah.
It has a very authentic feel. Oh, they did send a second unit over to get the background plates and establishing shots and things like that. So there is some authentic Cairo footage, but when they're digging in the desert, that's LA. San Fernando Valley or whatever it is.
Yep. So also, the one thing I wanted to say, the soundtrack, that opening scene we were talking about where the monster, where the mummy comes out of the sarcophagus or whatever. Not only is there no music in that scene, but there's almost no sound in it.
Yeah.
So like I've had it playing in the background and forgot that a movie was on, and then all of a sudden this dude starts laughing.
The peals of laughter come out of
It's really, really effective.
I think I was talking about it earlier, how I think that was one of the things that genuinely frightened me.
Yeah.
Is he just completely unhinged.
Yeah.
And that laugh it sticks with you.
Yep. And this movie does have music in it. Like you said, it uses the same tired theme song from everything else.
Yeah.
But it's used sparsely.
Yeah.
It's very effective. It's amazing that It's amazing that people don't try to make movies like this more often. It's
hard.
very creepy.
It's
I guess
hard.
it's really hard. The
It's
other
easier
thing
to make shit like the Brendan Fraser or Tom Cruise movie.
Yeah. Well, there you go. They are making mummy movies, and they're terrible.
Just terrible.
Well, they started making bad mummy movies in the 40s, but we can talk about that. The other thing is, Karloff has gone from this big mute brute to a guy that looks like he weighs about 22 pounds.
Yeah.
He's just a
frail
little guy wearing a sheet.
He says he dislikes being touched, and I think it's because he would crumble to pieces if he were.
That's true. Yeah. Well, there you go. The mummy.
Yeah, a good stiff wind would blow him away. Yeah.
And that's the effectiveness of that makeup. You believe that he's the guy that finally got those bandages off after 11 years.
Took 11 years, but here.
Yep.
Number 5.
Number 5.
My list is from RKO in 1945, The Body Snatcher.
So let me just interrupt to say my number 5 is from RKO, and it is The Body Snatcher.
Sure,
so we can just bounce it off.
We'll just go here. Yeah, it's the last of the Karloff-Lugosi team-ups, or whatever you want to call it. I think too much has been made of that, of them working together like that.
But in this movie, or
just in general. And the rivalry is ridiculous, because I don't think there was one in real life.
Yeah.
I mean, Lugosi could have been jealous of...
The scene in Ed Wood would have contributed to that. Everybody knows what I'm talking about.
It does, and
Lugosi.
it's purely fabricated, and the screenwriters will say that. From all accounts...
At the time, but I mean, in the Karloff and Lugosi book, it's mentioned several times that Lugosi's wives would talk about how much Lugosi didn't like Karloff. Like, he literally didn't like him. He was jealous, obviously, but also literally that there's the impression that he didn't like tea time on the set or whatever.
Well, I'm sure he didn't, but he never socialized on the set at all anyway.
Yeah.
There's story after story after story of him being aloof and looking at himself in the mirror. And
so I guess so then you can see where that develops into this sort of idea of a rivalry, or that they didn't like each other, when it was probably, like you say, more that they just weren't going to hang out together.
Yeah, I don't think they had any social connection
would love
at all.
to think that...
Yeah, they're hanging out at the Brown Derby having lunch together, but that would never in a million years have happened.
Yeah.
I don't think Lugosi disliked him as a person necessarily, because he was nothing but friendly and genial, and it's just been twisted into this hateful relationship between them, which I think is way over exaggerated, stressed far too much.
Yeah.
And I think it mostly comes from the Lugosi side.
Yeah. Well, we've also talked about there is a rivalry amongst people who are fans of these movies.
Yeah.
You got to pick which one you like better.
Right.
And we picked the
We
same
clearly
one.
picked one.
We picked one. We clearly picked one, and that's
Yeah.
weird that we would even bother,
Yeah.
right? And the notion is at least out there that Lugosi is maybe more popular, whereas at the time, or say when they were old, or in the 50s or whatever, in their lifetimes, let's say, Karloff was a success, and Lugosi's life fell apart.
Yeah.
He just crumble away to dust.
He did, yes. And everybody pinpoints it to turning down Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Which we could talk about a little later. And we have talked about in the podcast. I think we'll save that till, I'm sure, later in the list it'll come up.
Lugosi's come up quite a bit in this list.
He has. But anyway, this is,
the reason why we probably comes up now is in this film, there's no question.
There's no question whose
this
film
this is. This is a Boris Karloff film.
Yeah.
And he's not even the star.
Right.
Kind of.
Well, I mean, he's billed first.
Okay.
And actually the star of the film is billed third. Henry Daniell gets third billing after Lugosi.
After Lugosi, interesting.
And Lugosi gets second billing for what is essentially a bit part.
Yeah.
He's in a handful of scenes, if that. He's very good.
He's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, he's very good, because it's. I think these are one of those character roles that I think he's very good at. Mm-hmm. Lugosi playing not the lead, not doing his Lugosi shtick, is very good.
Yeah.
We'll see examples of that as we move along through the Frankenstein films. Mm-hmm. That he can be very good not doing his usual bag of tricks. Mm-hmm. And here he's not. He's very subdued. The character's kind of befuddled by everything going on around him. He can't quite grasp what exactly is happening. And I think he plays that very well. And
I think when I watch it, at least, I maybe I'm introducing it, but I feel like Lugosi's personal circumstances and appearance, really, because he started to, he doesn't look the same as he did in Dracula mind you, I don't look the same as I did 15 years. Is it 15 or no more? What year is this?
This
46?
is 45, so yeah.
It's about 15 years, 14
15,
years
16.
later. He's starting to look like the Bela Lugosi that we're going to see in the 50s fall apart in Edwards films. Yeah. And that he certainly has no power in this movie, and he tries vainly to just exact the slightest amount of influence over his own circumstances and gets strangled for it.
Well, that's a great scene.
It is.
It's a great scene between the two of them.
Yeah.
And Karloff lets him have his moment, but it's owned by Boris through the whole scene.
Yeah.
He's totally in charge. And this is one of the...
the character is.
The character is.
Yeah.
This is one of the all-time, I think, great Boris Karloff performances throughout. He is despicable. He's lovable.
Yeah.
He's funny. He's the great villain. I think villains are far more effective if they have charming qualities to them. They're much more effective than just black and white.
Yep.
Cabman Gray is a great character.
To the point where you could see why, I just want to call him Toddy, because he calls him Toddy, behaves the way he does. There's at least one scene, and I want to think maybe a couple, where he puts up with Cabman Gray when he shouldn't. Like he engages him in a conversation in the bar at one point, and you might be like, why is he still talking to this guy? And it's because he's charming. He's
charming, but also Gray has a lot on him that he could...
Yes.
He's used that leverage throughout.
Yeah, that's true.
But he is charming to talk to, and he's got that broad smile.
Yes.
And it's one of these things that Karloff is very chameleon-like. One thing we haven't really touched upon is that how different he looks from role to role.
Yeah.
Even in The Black Room, the two look very different. The way they carry themselves, the facial expressions are very, very different. And he can lose himself in these characters.
And like I said before, that it's weird when people look at what makes a great actor, and people who win the Academy Award for acting, oftentimes it seems to be, some people are great movie stars.
Yes.
And I believe this too. I watch some movies, and there's one in particular that I know you and I disagree on, is I love the Mission Impossible movies because Tom Cruise is a great movie star, and he's not expected to do a whole lot in the acting department. Yeah. Karloff isn't that at all. No, Karloff is a great actor. He's also beautiful to look at because I'm a weirdo, because he's not a beautiful guy.
No, but he's got the most interesting face.
Interesting to look at, yeah.
It's a very distinctive face, those eyes.
Yeah.
It goes back to Pierce given that canvas.
Yeah.
Obviously that makeup didn't work on anybody else, the Frankenstein. And here he's got very little makeup, just the mutton chops, and it's just him. I think they accentuated his eyebrows a little bit maybe too.
Maybe. Yeah.
Look a
little bit of makeup.
Yeah.
He brings something to it. He looks like he's really intimidating in this one. Like you get the impression that you could never beat this guy, and then somebody does. But that's all right.
Well, they do, but they
kind of
do.
They
kind of do, but they don't.
You still can't. You can kill him,
but you can't beat him.
You can't beat him.
Yeah.
There's another thing I wanted to say about this one is this movie is so literally dark. Like you can barely, the shadows like take over a lot of the scenes, and it just gets so dark you can barely see anything. So I just love that. I love that. We obviously, when we talk about, we're doing podcasts about these types of movies. That's a strength.
That's a positive. Yeah.
It's definitely a positive, and it's just so weird because Robert Wise has one of the weirdest careers in the history of movies.
Yeah.
He was the editor of Citizen Kane. So the interview I always end up seeing with him is an interview he did talking about the editing of Citizen Kane and I'm sorry, not of Citizen Kane, of Ambersons.
He did edit on Kane, but he talks about
Ambersons
because he was the guy that was ultimately tasked with
butchering
the film, and he tried, from what I understand, I think we're talking about the similar interviews, is he tried to get a hold of Orson and like, hey, you've got to stop this, and Wells didn't bother.
Well, the interview I'm thinking of, he defends the final product.
He does.
There's no question in my mind that the way Orson did it was better.
Yeah.
But he kind of does say the fact that it's considered a classic shows that we didn't butcher it too bad, and I disagree with him. It seems like a really weird movie at the end. Anyways, Robert Wise so he does this. He works with Orson Welles on Kane and Ambersons. Before you know it, he's making The Body Snatcher.
Well, he did Curse of the Cat People.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
That was his first film as a director.
Wow.
Because it's another example of the director being fired. Val Lewton. We should preface all this. This is a Val Lewton production, and you hear hear this term thrown around a lot, or the name thrown around a lot in horror discussions, genre discussions. He was a producer at RKO, always one of the minor studios that saw that.
Probably didn't help that they made Kane.
No, that didn't help him much.
That's not going to get you win
financially,
any.
That did not do them any favors.
Yeah.
Saw that, horror films are back, so let's do our own. And they contracted Val Lewton to be the head of this unit, making these low-budget, quickly made films. And in a lot of cases, they had the title before they had the script. Certainly The Cat People, he was given that title, make a movie called The Cat People. Here's the budget, here's the schedule, go.
Yeah.
And they've turned out to be some of the best horror films from the 1940s. They're very atmospheric. They don't have... Universal had monsters, God damn it, and they're going to use them. Luton had creepy stories, shadowy photography, great little scares pop out at you here and there. So they made some really effective films.
The Body Snatcher.
Body Snatcher
was that
being
one
where
where they had the title before they had the movie, or was
this is
this
actually based on
story?
a Robert Louis Stevenson
Okay, that's right.
story.
It is. That's right. Oh, that's right. I knew that. Have you read it?
No, I have not.
No. Okay.
This is one of the few of these that I haven't read the literary antecedent of. So.
And I guess the ending kind of has that feel to it, that you can picture what that story was probably like. And I wonder how closely the actual movie adheres to it. Probably the whole beginning isn't.
Well, and it's also based on a real event.
Yes, because they actually reference it.
They reference it.
What's their names?
Burke and Hare.
William Hare.
They
mentioned Burke and Hare. Yeah, that's interesting too, because if you don't know that, I wonder if you even understand what they're talking about. Like they don't say what they don't.
No,
say
they're not real overt about what they're doing. It's essentially stealing bodies from graves, gallows, anywhere to provide medical students with anatomy. Well, you know what I'm saying.
Working on them.
Working on them and things. Corpses to dissect, to study the human body.
Yeah.
They were very hard to procure back then. There was very stringent laws.
I suppose.
Yeah. So they had to be like condemned prisoner put to death, things like that. So there was a shortage of bodies for medical students. So enterprising people traded on that and made a pretty healthy living providing. And in Burke and Hare's case, they eliminated the middleman and just killed them themselves and sold to a doctor named Knox, who's referenced that Toddy worked for or had a hand in this. And of course, that's all fictional, but that's sort of the historical backdrop.
It's an interesting choice to do that because that's what he's doing.
Yeah.
And that's what Karloff does.
Yep.
The exact same thing. He's taking the bodies out of the grave until he's not bothering with the grave part anymore.
Right.
And it's an interesting way to throw in that. It seems like maybe you wouldn't need to reference Burke and Hare, but it works. Works. Sure, why not?
Well, he's got that. That's what he's got holding over Toddy.
Yeah. Okay, I see what you mean. That's true.
He's got that. That's why Toddy puts up with him at all. Yeah. Because he's got that over him. Yep. And it doesn't work out well for anybody.
Really not a lot of happiness in this one.
Yeah. This followed right after House of Frankenstein for Karloff.
Amazing. Which
he referred to as a monster clam bake, and he thought was ridiculous. But he gives a great performance in it. We talked about it. But he said that Val Lewton rescued him from the living dead and restored his soul. Okay. Which essentially he allowed him to act, and he's great in this. He does an excellent performance.
I was going to say, my note is it's just another example of something we said a bunch of times, a movie that is almost completely due to Karloff's performance. Yeah. The direction's great, and as you said, Lugosi's great, but...
Well, Henry Daniell is great, too.
He's fine, but he's
a very cold actor to begin with. I don't think you're ever going to warm up to him in anything. Even like The Great Dictator, where he's a little more sympathetic a character, there's still a little off-putting quality to him.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just how he was.
Yep.
And,
and I think he's best in this movie when he's playing off of Karloff. Yeah. So that's what I mean by Karloff.
Karloff dominates the film.
Yeah.
There's no question. Yeah. That you feel his presence even in scenes that he's not in.
Right.
He also did Bedlam and Isle of the Dead for Val Lewton, and they're good too.
I didn't know that about Bedlam. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And Bedlam is based on a true story, but greatly exagerated. And
that's another.
I mean, that didn't make my top list. It's on the runners up.
I think it's on my runners up because I hadn't seen it until recently. I found when we were making this list. It's one of the ones that I watched, and it flirted with making my list. But we can talk about that one. So I think I talked about already that Lugosi's playing a character who's a bit desperate.
Yes.
which is like that's
I think
maybe
that's
the
little,
desperation in Lugosi's
little
real life.
art imitating life there.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate. I think you have to feel bad for Lugosi in a way, but I think he was his own worst enemy.
Well, sure. I mean, yeah. He I mean, yeah. It's hard to know where to start on that.
It is.
Because one of the things I think it's in, I think Mank talks about it in the Boris Karloff, I'm sorry, Bela Lugosi, Boris Karloff, A Haunting Collaboration or whatever it's called, is that Karloff would say that he thought one of the problems that Lugosi had and why he maybe didn't have as great a career as he did is that he didn't learn English quickly enough when he started, which Mank rightly points out to at least our modern ears sounds a little xenophobic and a little bit. It doesn't age well, that statement, but
I think there's
some truth to it, and so that's something you can point to. But also, I mean, he was a drug addict, but so that's a behavioral thing that you can point to and say he was his own worst enemy.
Well, I think
not without sympathy, though.
Yeah, right. As far as the English, even by the 50s, you still get examples where he's having difficulty pronouncing certain things.
Yeah.
And he did keep to himself. He kept to his Hungarian little clack.
Right.
That didn't do him any favors, whereas Karloff was everybody's best friend.
Yeah, right.
It's surprising. It come across more and more examples of like, well, he was a great friend of his. He was a great friend of his. He was a great... Noble Johnson, the Nubian in The Mummy, was one of his best friends. So he got around.
That's cool.
He was very gregarious, very funny, and I think Lugosi had a sense of humor that was a little darker and more European in that sense, and that didn't translate well. He didn't make friends the way Karloff did.
Again, I'm reminded of that deleted scene from Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, where it just seems like Lugosi's not sure what's going on.
Yeah, he looks a little befuddled and a little annoyed.
Yeah, but then I think in one of those documentaries they suspect that that's Lugosi playing that up, and
maybe,
that if there was another second in there, you'd see him cut up or something. But yeah, poor Bela. Yeah,
it's Dear Boris and Poor Bela is usually how they are referred to, and I think not without some justification.
Mm-hmm. I think it's fun that we've already talked about at least 2 collaborations that they've had. That when I first started watching these movies, I wasn't aware that they'd worked together that many times. It doesn't even seem it. You might not even realize that. You might think they never worked together.
Well, sometimes I forget that they were together in Son of Frankenstein.
Yeah, exactly.
I sort of forget that. Oh yeah, I guess that counts.
That counts.
Yeah,
we're not done talking. Well, I mean, at least I'm not done.
Well, we've got years worth of.
I mean, on my list.
Yeah.
I haven't. This isn't the last.
Warning.
Spoilers.
This is
So yeah, good. We both had the same number 5. Now we'll see. We'll probably the rest of them will all be the same. It's possible.
It's possible. It is entirely possible.
We'll see. There might be. We'll see.
Let me throw a few ringers.
I'll say this. I'm sure the last 4 are the same. They just might be in a slightly different order. So you won the coin toss.
Well, my number 4 was the Black Cat.
Oh.
So we already discussed that in
Oh
length.
well, then I've lost my way. I don't know what to do. So so we think we kind of.
Well, we covered. There's a couple notes that I have.
You get to talk too.
We talked about it having been re-edited and reshot a little bit. We didn't really go into the specifics. This film was made while the Lemleys were on vacation in Europe, so he was pretty much the grown-ups were gone.
Yeah.
So the kids got to make the movie.
Okay.
And Ulmer indulged himself to the fullest. And Uncle Carl and Junior came back and were absolutely aghast at what they saw. There is no way Universal will release this film. It's out of the question.
And rightfully so.
Well, I think from what I understand, yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, Mank, there's an article in like American Cinematographer that I first became aware of this. And this was like late 80s. Then in his original edition of, it was Karloff and Lugosi. And then he expands greatly upon it in Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff. And Tom Weaver in Universal Horrors, they all talk about that both Karloff and Lugosi were the bad guys, basically. That Lugosi had much more sinister intentions in the beginning. And you actually saw Karloff being flayed alive and him like writhing on the floor as a pulpy mass, which I would...
Really?
That's what I understand. I would love to see that, how they would have done that in 34.
Huh.
And all that went...
My first thought was to say they probably didn't do very good, but I guess they did a lot of things very good, so maybe.
You never know. Yeah,
this movie looks great.
It does look great. So they insisted that he do some reshooting. They gave him like 3.5 days or something like that, and token amount of money to...
And a chess set.
Now, I think that was originally there. It just had a different flavor to it.
Okay, so there's at least one line in there that had to be changed, though. I don't remember if it's an overdub. Because I just watched it, and I was trying to figure this out. That's one of the things that's fun about watching this movie is trying to figure that out. And, Lugosi very clearly, and it seems like it's in the two-shot, he says something like, we're going to play chess to see if I win. That's right. If I win, then you'll release her and we can set her free or something like that.
Yeah, but I think that's still
the bad crazy version? The old crazy version?
Because he's just going to use her for his own means.
Which is so weird.
Yeah.
The movie's so weird.
It is such a weird movie. But one thing that he did, he added some kinky stuff to it, is Karloff prowling around in his little museum of dead brides that he's got displayed, and he's lovingly encased in these glass coffins, and their hair is, I don't know if they're being held up by their hair. Kind of looks like that.
There's a part in the book where, we just keep talking about, now I'm just calling it the book, but Mank's book, where he talks about, he interviewed the actress.
Oh, Lucille Lund, yeah.
And that she claims she was wrapped up in that thing, and her hair is part of it. I don't think she's held by her hair, but that he left her there for when
lunch.
They went to lunch.
Yeah, there again, you hear those things all the time.
Yeah.
There's one in Ghost of Frankenstein where I'll give it away because we won't be talking about it for years, but it starts where Chaney, as the monster, is encased in the hardened sulfur, and Igor breaks him out. Mm-hmm. And apparently they put him in that, let it dry, and all went to lunch in the shot. So he's sitting there the whole time. And there's
See, that one at least has to have some truth to it, because how else would they have done that scene?
And Glenn Strange talks about, too, being in the ice and in the mud and this and that for long periods of time. Yeah. So what's true and what's not, I don't know. Go with the legend, I guess.
Yeah, there you go. Why not?
Who cares? Karloff's character is based a little bit on the famous Satanist Aleister Crowley.
That's right.
Who was one of the biggest charlatans ever. I don't know a whole lot about him, but claimed to be, the high priest of whatever. And, he's on the cover of Sgt. Pepper, so can't go wrong there.
There you go.
Yeah.
And Jimmy Page lived in his house or something
like that. Yeah. So
is he the guy? No, I'm thinking of a different guy. When did he die?
Crowley?
Yeah, I don't know. I can't remember if it's Crowley or not. Then I shouldn't mention it. But I think it was Crowley that L. Ron Hubbard hung out with, if I remember right.
Could be.
And that people use that as a way to point to what Hubbard became. He had a very cleaned up version of same crazy shit.
Sure.
Cult leader, basically.
Yeah, basically. This is one of the last of the Laemmle horrors. And this is one of the films that led to the enforcement of the production code, which we didn't really discuss before. It was one of the last pre-code. So middle of this year of 34, it was released in May.
Okay.
So after June or July, this film wouldn't have been made the way it is.
Okay.
So this is one of the last to survive the pre-code era.
And it's weird because I'm sitting here trying to do calculations, because horror itself dies out about 2 years later, right? Yeah. They stop making them. And I guess it's
for about a year and a half, yeah.
So it's because of that. It's all part of the same
story. Part of the same thing. And they were actually not doing as well at the box office. You'd have your odd Bride of Frankenstein, but they were getting fewer and far between. And then, of course, the famous British embargo on no more horror films at all, period, which put the kibosh on. So Dracula's Daughter was like the last of the original run.
It's also weird to think, too, what was the world like then? Because Son of Frankenstein comes out when World War II starts. So, England is putting the embargo on horror films, and Europe is becoming this very strange, scary place. It's hard to... And, then, of course, there was the Depression.
Yeah.
It's a very odd thing to try and figure out what people were worried about. Maybe we weren't worried about the right things, or maybe we were. I don't know.
Well, I think it comes down to escapism.
Yeah.
Certainly, the horror film, the musical, the gangster picture, all of those things were huge in the 30s during the Depression, because of the Depression. I think Prohibition early on had a lot to do with it as well.
I forgot about Prohibition, sure.
But that's gone by 33, so...
That's kind of a weird thing about watching Scarface.
Yeah.
Is it's made during Prohibition. Right. Well, then the other thing is so then people blame horror movies as being some bad influence on people.
Oh, there's a number of cases. Apparently Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde from Paramount in 32, inspired some guy to kill some kid or something like that, and the court threw that out.
Right.
It's never been an effective defense.
Mm-hmm.
The movie made me do it.
Yeah, I suppose.
Clockwork Orange too was blamed for a lot of stuff, and to the point where Kubrick and his family were getting threats and stuff. So he pulled it from England. It didn't show in England till
right,
like the 90s.
Yeah, there's always something. There's always something people point to.
Yeah,
I just watched that documentary recently about Judas Priest going to court, the band. In the 80s, they a kid attempted suicide, and he and his friend attempted suicide.
Yeah.
One was successful, the other one wasn't, and they said that they did it because of the music, and then they were trying to say that they were using some sort of subliminal backwards something or other.
That was always
and they actually had to go to trial. So you've actually got the singer of Judas Priest, which when you think about it, you think about heavy metal music, you can imagine any number of ways how this person might come across, but it's Rob Halford, the singer of Judas Priest, who's a very calming presence, I guess. He comes across as very intelligent and articulate and is able to defend himself, thank goodness, or else it'd be another damn thing that people be blaming bad stuff on.
Well, that still goes on though.
Yep, it's the next thing. Now it's Minecraft. I mean, I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah, with the kids these days with their
YouTube. Honestly, YouTube is there's a lot of people worried about YouTube. And for some good reason.
Rightfully so, yeah.
Yeah, I just heard the term used, the YouTube comments section being scrubbed of a child pornography ring.
Yes.
So they're in the comments on YouTube. How does that even work? I don't even understand what I just said.
It's
beyond me.
If you're listening on YouTube,
that's true. Please leave a comment.
Leave a comment.
No, this one won't be on YouTube.
No, this won't be on YouTube.
That's right.
Yeah.
At least
not right away.
Yeah.
So I think we've covered The Black Cat pretty good.
Excellent.
Pretty good.
I think so.
So your number 4 is?
My number 4, released in 1939, is Son of Frankenstein.
I'm shocked.
Yeah?
So basically the top 3 are going to be the same films in certain orders.
Well, no, because you didn't do Son of Frankenstein yet.
No, it didn't make my top.
It didn't make your top 10?
Make my top 10.
Oh my goodness.
I know.
Wow.
I was surprised.
Okay.
But I did the
You did the little thingy.
Yep.
Okay, so I don't want to do the podcast anymore because you're not a Frankenstein fan.
Yeah, there's
two
Frankenstein films that didn't make it.
So there are 5 films that I know off the top of my head that Boris Karloff made that had the word Frankenstein in the title. Is there 5 or 6? 5. And you know.
Yeah, there's 5.
I admit Frankenstein 1970
is
did
not going to be
make
on
my
top
list.
of anybody's list.
But then I haven't seen it, so.
Well,
so
do you want to? Because I could.
I have a copy. I just haven't watched it yet. So this movie, part of the reason it's on this list is it had a significant impact on me. I talked about it again in episode 0, but my sort of history of getting introduced to these films, this is it. This is really the start. I mean, I point to Young Frankenstein, but I watched this movie and realized that Young Frankenstein was so much a copy of this. So this is what started me to any of this.
Okay.
So that's probably gonna impact how I feel about it.
Absolutely will.
And into this genre, but into Frankenstein movies in particular, Karloff and Lugosi movies in particular, Universal films in particular. Right. This is all you get it all here, in my opinion, and it's great again to see Lugosi do well.
Lugosi, this is the film that I will say he gives his best performance in.
Yeah, he doesn't. There's no moment where you're what's the word? Cringing. You're not cringing at anything he does.
No,
here.
Everything he does is great.
If anything, he's exceeding expectations regularly.
Yeah.
To the point, I believe the impression I got was that. The director, what's his name? I can't remember his name.
Roland V. Lee.
There you go.
Yeah.
The impression I get is that he thought that Lugosi was getting short shrift and
totally shafted by Universal.
Got shafted by Universal and so expanded his role. That's one of the things about this movie is it does meander a bit because the director apparently was happy to just sort of wing it a lot of the time.
The shooting script is radically different than the finished film, and not in a bad way at all. It gets a little silly in the script. They bring in the army and lobbing hand grenades at the monster, and none of it works.
Yeah.
So I think they kept it true to sort of the world that James Whale had created, but gave it its own.
Yeah.
And I'll just say that it didn't make my top 10 Karloff films, but it would make my top 10, probably top 5 Frankenstein films, would make my top Universal films. It's just Karloff is underutilized.
No, that's for sure.
To a great deal, which is why it didn't, in looking at Karloff films, it's not in my top 10.
That's an interesting way of looking at it. Yeah, Karloff is not even needed in this movie. He gets a few seconds.
He's got a few moments that are worthy, but
obviously the big one would be his emotional reaction to finding
Igor.
Finding Igor. I mean, that's 2 seconds. When he looks in the mirror with Basil Rathbone. But even that isn't spectacular, to be honest. Yeah. He's got a creepiness that. So here's why it does matter: is throughout the movie, there's a creepiness that comes along with the fact that it's Boris Karloff playing Frankenstein's monster.
Yeah.
You're never gonna have that again.
Right.
So when he comes swinging around a tree or whatever to hook somebody by the
Michael Mark,
neck,
I believe. No,
I don't even remember. See, I didn't watch this one in preparation for this because I've seen it so many times.
Yeah,
I figured I don't need to watch it again. So that's a strength of this movie. Boris Karloff being in this movie is a strength of this movie.
Oh, it is.
Just because it's Boris Karloff.
It is. I agree.
Yeah,
I agree with that. He looks great. He's huge.
Mm-hmm.
They've padded him up.
He's the guy that played the Mummy. 7 years before.
And
looked like he was going to disappear.
Stiff breeze would blow him away.
Yeah.
Yeah. And here he looks just absolutely gigantic.
He's called a giant.
Yeah.
In I guess there are references to that in the previous films too.
Yeah.
But after this, he's a giant.
Yeah.
I think in the next movie they call him a giant too.
Yeah.
But he's a big doof in that one.
Doofus lumbering around.
And so this is, as you say, the start of that. So that's unfortunate.
Yeah, I think they made a mistake in that going that direction.
Yeah,
I think Igor and the monster conspiring. It's here in this film, but I think it could have been even better if the monster had retained the intelligence that was growing with each movie.
Yep.
Would have made a much more effective villain. He's doing Igor's bidding, but he still had a mind of his own. Here, he's becoming the robot that would lurch around at the last 5 minutes of the house films and wander off into the swamp.
So these movies keep giving the monster the ability to speak. We're going to talk about this a lot over the next 10 years.
Yeah.
But he gets the ability to speak, and then he loses it for no reason. Yeah. But I mean, he's not well in this one either.
Well, I think this starts a tradition of that too, which is very unfortunate because you'll see it again and again and again.
Yeah, I think every time,
except for the next one.
Well, even then
slightly.
He's a little, it just lasts for a few seconds until the lightning comes around. He's incapacitated in some way
in every single one of them.
And
even Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein.
Yep, and so we start the grand tradition of characters that meet this incapacitated monster and are compelled,
driven to
bring him. I have to see him at his full strength.
Yeah,
and
it makes sense here because he is a Frankenstein.
Yeah, that's true.
He's the son, so he's vindicating his father in some way.
That's true. That works also for Ghost and for young Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Not so well other times.
not.
Although I don't think that's what happens in House. But anyways, doesn't matter. It's the same idea. It's about like that.
Over and over again.
One of the things that we've mentioned on this podcast, I knew you mentioned it, was this is the first one back after
the embargo.
The embargo.
Yeah.
So what happens is, and I heard this on our podcast, so I know it's true.
So you know it's true? Depends on who said
it. Hey!
No,
I know, just kidding. So there was a triple bill of classic old horror movies from just like 6 years before of Dracula, Frankenstein, and Son of Kong. And it's a hit. So then they realize that they can make these movies again. And so, as I say, I heard on our podcast, they pull out all the stops on this one. Right. This movie's big budget, and it looks like it's
the
gorgeous.
Last A production for a Frankenstein film at Universal.
Yeah, and as a result, Wolf brings his family to live in the craziest fucking house.
Yeah.
Like it's as crazy as in the Black Cat. It's astonishingly bizarre and bizarrely shaped, but a little more, slightly more homey than the Black Cat. Although the beds are head to head, so that's not a good sign. You never want to see that.
No.
When the house is full of dread.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that in a few years, but I love that
or
part.
You send the butler to give the toddler his lunch and he disappears. Now the inference is the monster did it, but maybe the toddler did. You never know. It's a weird house.
Oh, that's an interesting... Well, we'll have to see what happens.
Save that for
Save that for
2021.
whatever year we get to that. And of course, at this point, not a foregone conclusion that Bela Lugosi's going to get to have this. He could easily have destroyed himself before this point.
Yeah.
How does he even end up in this? It's almost like a whim that somebody had.
Yeah, I think
throw Lugosi in it too.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's, a marketing thing. He certainly wasn't the big draw he had been. At this point, he was, mired in the beginnings of his Poverty Row. I don't think maybe he had worked for a few years, actually.
That's unusual, because
I think
he worked a lot.
I think the ban on horror films in
that's true.
37, 38 really hurt him. Whereas Karloff went on and did other things.
Night Key.
Well, so now you blew my number one.
Sorry.
Damn it.
Sorry, that's all right. We'll have plenty more to say about Night Key.
God damn it.
At some point, maybe we'll have to do a top 10 Lugosi films, because it's interesting.
Oh, yeah, because
that
it'll be
we've got
radically
so
different.
many.
Yeah,
I don't know. I feel like I could talk about Igor all day, and that's what's going to help us get
That's going to help us get through the
runaround of that movie,
yeah.
because it is a lot of runaround. Yeah. There's a lot of running around. There's at least one point in that movie where the characters almost seem to look at each other like, oh, hey, that's how I'll get this character to this spot and this character over here, because we couldn't figure it out before or whatever.
Yeah, there's a lot of at cross purposes.
But I think we'll find when we do get to it, it does all actually work. Technically, it all works out. There is a reason for this character to be over there and this to be over there. So it could have been worse. We've certainly seen films where it's not true.
No.
Yeah, and that's pretty good accomplishment for a film with a script that was being rewritten day by
daily
day.
So it was almost like an MGM production.
Sure, exactly. The set design is great. The lighting is great.
Jack Otterston, I believe, the designer.
Oh.
Yeah.
See,
so this is more of the expressionistic look that Flory probably would have given his Frankenstein.
Yeah.
But there, I think the emphasis would have been solely on that.
Yeah.
Less on the story making sense and the film that we are talking about to this day.
The acting.
The acting, obviously, is not a huge deal for him, because if you've seen Murders in the Rue Morgue, you'll know that acting is not a priority.
Nope. Basil Rathbone's great.
Basil Rathbone is always great. He's a pro. There again, he's someone that he and Karloff got on really well and formed a pretty good friendship that paid off later. They would work again in the 60s together. There's actually a great photo from Comedy of Terrors where the four of them, it's Karloff, Peter Lorre, Vincent Price, and Basil Rathbone, are posed in coffins, and Laurie's is perpendicular to the other three in the back, and he's doing something silly, but it's very obvious that Rathbone and Karloff have made each other laugh, because Karloff is scrunched up like he's laughing pretty hard, and Rathbone has a huge grin. So
That's cool.
It's lovely to see that.
That is pretty cool to think that, because in this movie, again, obviously they don't have any rapport really, because one guy is playing a lump.
You watch the immediate follow-up, Tower of London, and they have a rapport.
I still haven't even seen
Have
it.
you seen that? Yeah,
Terrible.
where Karloff is... Rathbone is Richard III, and Karloff is his executioner.
Yeah.
And
it's in
the Boris Karloff collection. Yeah.
That's what I was looking in the K's, but it's over there. I have it. Yeah. I have to watch it. I did think I should probably watch it for this, because it might have ended up on my list. But,
it was close on mine.
Yeah.
It was up there, but obviously not here. So.
But yeah, Basil's great in this.
Yeah.
His character even has a kind of arc that you can follow.
Yeah.
He starts out one way and he goes a little over the edge, and then it kind of wraps up. And of course, Lionel Atwill
is outstanding. Yeah. It's one of his best.
Mm-hmm. Probably his best.
Because unless you've seen Mystery of the Wax Museum
Mystery of the Wax
Murders
Museum,
in the Zoo.
But I prefer what he's doing here. So, but then whatever.
Well, it's comfort food at this point. And he's great. And obviously Kenny Mars spoofs it amazingly in Young Frankenstein.
But he doesn't even try to do the same thing.
Oh no! Yeah. It's the arm shtick and stuff. He's so good. Both of them manipulate, and it's clearly their own arm. Yeah. But the amount of concentration to do that well, pretty impressive.
Yep.
Yeah, he's great. It's don't get me wrong. It's a great movie. It's a movie I love, but it didn't make my top 10 just because it's not a great Karloff movie per se.
It is a great Donnie Dunagan movie.
It is a great Donnie Dunagan movie.
It might be my favorite Donnie Dunagan
I think it is.
movie.
Yes, I think so.
We're still not done.
Yeah, can you imagine?
that was just the end of part 2. This is going to go on forever.
We are never actually going to reveal a number
Number
one
one.
because we're going to pad it out that long.
That's right.
It's just going to keep going and going. It's like the Energizer Bunny of podcasts.
That's right.
So join us for part what, 3? 4?
At least 3.
3.
Belong